Some of our officials will remain available to provide support. Contact us via our social media platform for a speedy response to our questions, with some of us and some of the staff will be full-time working at home to make sure that we can be contacted on any emergency that arises, or if there's any matter that committees don't understand. But in the main, yeah, there is no movement that's going to happen in the schools because we are also in the full lockdown like everybody else. And we will announce when we are able to reopen, guided by health, but also guided by how we conduct ourselves after today's midnight. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you so much, Minister. Colleagues, we can now take questions. Please show by raising your hand so that we're able to identify you, and then you can then proceed to ask your questions. I'm seeing 2 hands right now. I'm going to start there at the back. Please identify yourself and then ask your question, and then I'll come to you.
Good day, Sipho Stilman from SABC TV News. Minister, you said there is no exact date of reopening of schools, but preparations are underway. Exactly what are these preparations, or what work is currently underway to prepare for the eventual opening? And also, you mentioned that, of course, we'll consider the eventual opening after the lockdown has been lifted, but the danger of the coronavirus will still be there. And we know that often in certain provinces, classrooms are overflowing, schools are congested, so that in itself is a danger. So are you looking in situations like that? Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. I'm seeing another hand on my right.
Thank you very much. I have one question.
Please identify yourself first.
My name is Umamad, I'm writing American Citizen today. I'm from Equal Education. I wanted to know if there are, because you spoke about skeleton staff being left inside the DBE, and I'm wondering if there are places where there's a consideration around safety protocols for school children inside their communities during this time, and if there are something the DBE will take on quite deliberately. The reason we're asking this is because we're wondering who inside the DBE or anyone else in government is going to be helping with the delivering or dropping off of hard copy materials. How are people going to be able to know how we're going to get a hold of the HODs, as you've spoken about, like a centralized, streamlined approach from the DBE? And how do we ensure that children that are in the peripheries of highly density areas or the rural, peri-rural urban areas are able to still receive the National School Feeding Scheme? And is that responsibility then passed off completely to the DSD? And we'd also like to know if the DBE and provincial departments of education are going to make their websites data free so that learners can access the resources you speak of.
Okay. There are no other questions, Minister. I'm going to hand over to you, and the DM is here as well to provide support to the Minister and also deal with other questions. Minister, I'm handing over to you.
Yeah, as you said, Chair, we will share the answers with the DM. On the recovery plan is going to be informed by, for instance, the first time when we were working on, just to give you an example on how we were planning the recovery plan, we were calculating that we're going to lose 10 days and what are the implications of losing 10 days, so that the material is to consolidate, to revise and add hours, because you also want to manage that which you can control. So to say you'll ask people to do this and outside the school hours was quite difficult. So we had developed materials, and that's why if you look at the materials we're using was for revision of term 1. Because for term 1 we had lost 2 days. So what is it that we would have lost for closing early? And now we're beginning to lose time on term 2. So how are we going to compensate on the days and the hours we're losing on term 2? So it's based on what our plans are and where we find ourselves at different times. So it will be your enrichment materials. We're going to possibly have longer classes, So enrichment material, that's what we're planning in terms of the recovery plan. And our recovery plan is going to be informed by what we would have lost in days, in times from the plans that we have. If you recall, when we closed schools early, we had said to make up for the 10 days we're going to lose, we're going to extend to take 7 days from the June holidays, 3 days from September. That's part of the recovery, and say we're going to teach longer. But now we're beginning to lose even more than the 10. So what is it that we do then to compensate? So, and that's why we're in constant communication to say, what are we losing which we have to recover? We're losing time, right? But we're also mainly we're losing time. And it's to calculate our recovery in terms of what the plans are. In terms of when are we going to come, what are the health risks, that's what we were discussing with MECs to say, in some centers, it will be like the deconcentration. Most of our schools are crowded in terms of boarding schools. There are more learners close to each other. What plans will we have by the time we reopen? Again, talking about the real world, because we can't, and I can't expect provinces that if we open schools, say for argument's sake, we open in the 16, they would have created more spaces for deconcentration. But it's one of the factors that we had to do to say, what are the different health protocols in the context we find ourselves, we will be able to realistically put in place. And that's what the discussions are all about. They're not finalized, but it's what we're discussing also as the sector. We had to do an audit of the availability of water, for instance, to say, I had to ask province to say, to give me an audit, which school, whether it's not running water, has no access to water. So if they're using boreholes, are they all fully functional? If it's potable water, are the supplies always there? So we had also to do an audit in terms of the availability of water in the sector. But we have not, and that's what we're engaged. We have not finally finalized the health implications of us reopening at any other time, but opening we have, and that's why we have to look at it. In terms of, there's no skeletal staff. It's lockdown. You see, after 12 midnight, all of us are in houses. No one is moving. We're not distributing anything. There's no one who's distributing. The only people I had asked for permission that they should be allowed, not even this week, from next week, will be people who are working on broadcast, and very few of them. Right? Very few of them. So there's no distribution, and that's why I would say there won't be any feeding. There's no one's going to be feeding, because it means then there's no lockdown. That's when we are asking and working through social development to get committees to step up without feeling insensitive to what the challenges are in the communities. And that's why we're humbly appealing to committees to step up, because from equal education, I always say in December we close for 6 weeks. We close the whole of December, 2 weeks in January. In June, we close for 3 weeks. So we shouldn't underestimate the capacity of communities themselves to be able to carry themselves. We know there's going to be lots of distress, and that's why social development is looking at how families and communities in distress are going to be assisted. But we definitely, and that's why I mentioned in the statement, we feed 9.6 million children every day. There is no way under the lockdown we can pretend that we can do it under lockdown. It's not going to happen. Social development is looking at measures, and they'll speak for themselves, of how they assist communities, because those kids are already in communities and families in distress, but we won't be feeding at all. We won't be distributing any materials at all. And that's why the recovery program is not only focusing on your ICT platforms. We are counting days and hours we're losing and say, when the schools reopen, how do we make up for them? Are we going to, because we're even obviously having to change our school calendar, right? Is that what we're going to do to save the year? So those are some of the things we're talking about, but anything that gets us to move it, it's not going to happen. Anything that is going to happen is what is going to happen through ICTs. So when we say people must talk to us, they must communicate with us through ICTs. Don't expect that we'll get officials in the office. There won't be officials in the office after midnight today. There won't be anyone. There will be, from next week, permission for a few officials who are working on the ICT platforms for limited hours, and safety protocols have been put in place. Anything else, anything moving, there's nothing moving on our side after midnight today. So, Tim, I'm not sure if I left anything out, but really want to emphasize that after midnight, we're not moving.
Minister, I think you have covered everything. Oh. Yeah, I think you have covered everything, except there's this question of free data from basic education. I think Minister mentioned that there's Vodacom virtual classroom that is free for our learners. And the issue of school nutrition for rural, our learners are learners, all of them, whether rural or from townships, because poverty is not only in rural areas, is there and is rife in townships, especially in informal settlements. The way social development is responding when schools are closed, because there are NGOs that work with social development that are feeding the learners, that will still continue. Minister, I think how South Africans collectively respond to the call of the lockdown will determine the spread of the virus. And if we all positively respond as South Africans, we will change. The spread will not be as we suspect that it will grow. It will be minimal, because we have been informed and everyone have been educated how to behave and how to respond to this. So I believe that if we really adhere to all what the President has said and the Department of Health has said, we will win this virus. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Just on the issue of the zero rating, most of the material that the Minister has spoken about is freely available. For example, the Vodacom virtual classroom, it's zero rated, and the content that is there is grade specific. So if you were to go to it, whether you have data or not, it doesn't matter which network you are using, you will be able to access all the content, which is good quality. We've been using it for some time, so it's reliable. If you were to go there, you wouldn't need to access the website of the department. I thought I should just make an addition to that one, Minister. Any other questions, colleague? I'm seeing two hands again, 3 now. Okay, let me give fresh hands. I'm seeing you then.
Thank you very much. It's Zanda Noble from Newsroom Africa. While it is admirable that you will have all this learning material available online, I think some of the concerns even from parents is how are you going to be assessing, the pupil's ability to grasp the particular content that you're going to put online, because that's exactly the role that's played by teachers to ensure, different pupils have different, learning capabilities. So when we do eventually come out of the lockdown, what preparations are you putting in place for the teachers, but also for the pupils to ensure that, yes, this content was online, but some pupils may not grasp the content the same way as others would.
All right, thanks for that. Sipho?
It's just a clarity question here again. So right now, as we stand, Minister, you do not know when schools are likely to reopen.
All right, thank you. I think there was a third hand.
It's Halpalelo Palaitila from Jacaranda News. I just want clarity when it comes to the reopening of schools and that decision. Will private schools and independent schools be allowed to pick their own dates, or will they have to go with the dates that the department is taking for public schools?
Thank you for that. Minister, I'm going to hand over to you again.
Yeah, let me take the easy one about the reopening of schools. I really don't know. We were speculating to say if the lockdown finishes on the 16th, this is the likelihood for teaching. But it's going to be determined by the curve, because that's what put us in the lockdown. So if it flattens and health says they think it would be wise to move out, that's when we will be able to say yes, indeed. But now the lockdown has not started. We will monitor as the center that is monitoring the spread of coronavirus, and then we'll be able to communicate with the public to say we are still experiencing a spike, maybe it's not safe to still send kids back to school. Because if you recall, even before the lockdown, we're the first that were requested to close. And simply because of the risk that we pose to the public, we have lots of people, children, at the same place at the same time. If it could break up in one school, the chances of it spreading throughout the village, because all these 1,000 kids are possibly going to 1,000 homes, then it's much more dangerous. So ourselves and the churches are just one of the biggest risks in terms of spreading the virus. So the answer, I don't know. We're going to be informed by, as I say, health from an ICD in terms of their estimations to say, indeed, can we go back as education, as I said, because of the risk that we pose as the sector, but also the risk that we have as a sector, especially primary schools with younger kids and all sorts of things. So the long and short, the answer is, I really don't know. But we will communicate on an ongoing basis from monitoring after the lockdown, how things are going, and I think the Minister of Health will give us direction. In terms of recovery, that's why I explained that our recovery in the main is informed by our losses of time. So I will not be able to account for things that I cannot control. For instance, we are saying, and that's what we've been agonizing with SSS MECs, that if we say people have to use ICT platforms, there are assumptions that we're making that we know are not real in the real world, are not even possible. Because some of the programs, some households have got 8 school-going kids. So if we say the grade 8 at 9 to 11, the grade, so it means the whole day, those 8 kids have to be exchanging time and listening to different programs. It's not something that you can guarantee will work as effective. So there are lots of shortcomings with your ICT platform. But we are saying we are not going to hopelessly say everything won't work. So we'll see what we can as an interim measure. But our recovery plan is informed by that which we can do ourselves with learners. And that's why we're counting dates, we're counting hours to say we've lost 10 days. 10 days means the following, but so we're going to have to assess them. And that's why we're looking at extra days, extra hours in schools, not in communities. These are just extras that we are looking at and say children who have access, we can access these resources can, because in rural areas where even if there's a radio, it belongs to Gogo. To think now all these grandchildren will be taking the radio from Gogo the whole day, it's a school in the classroom. It's assumption of a certain order, which we know is not so much available in your high density, but in home states where there are more people. So, and that's what in the statement, I say our main emphasis on the recovery. It's a recovering lost time in terms of days and hours we're losing and planning around those. To say if we have lost 10 days, are we going to be able to add 10 days on the calendar? No. If we've lost, because we also don't want to teach children right through and not give them a break. Are we going to, teacher unions have proposed, have agreed that we'll have longer hours. Again, don't want to teach for longer hours that kids cannot cope. We are looking at enrichment programs. We're canceling some of the activities that we normally have that disrupt the schools. And that's what is going to inform our recovery. These others are just going enrichment, but it's not our basis for the recovery program. Our recovery program is our contact with learners. And that's why we're counting on the basis of contact. So we won't assess that we have not taught. We won't evaluate what we have not taught. We'll only assess that which we had done on a face-to-face, in a structured classroom, in a formal setting. And that's what is going to inform our recovery program, because that's what we can reliably work on and not any other thing. Jim?
Thank you, Minister. Private schools and independent schools, they are owners, they live in South Africa. They adhere to the laws of this country, Republic. And again, they will adhere to what the Department of Basic Education is saying, because we are one sector. They don't operate somewhere where we don't know. In indeed, a teacher cannot be replaced. A teacher will always be a teacher. And when we say, Minister said that there will be lessons from SABC TV, radio, community radio stations, those people that are in those radio stations are professional teachers. Whether they are subject advisors, but they are professional teachers, they know the curriculum, they know even the curriculum coverage as to where are we now. We are still in the first quarter, this is what we should cover. And as they are teaching there, they also make some assessment. Yes, they may not be as effective as in the classroom situation, but even the learners, because it's not just that they've been given workbook and were left alone. Yes, reading, parents must help them. On workbooks, they must help them. But on those other medium, the professionals also give answers to the hard questions which they encounter. Thank you.
Yeah. So just to emphasize what DM has said about private schools, we have a very healthy working relationships with that private school sector. And I'm sure we won't have difficulties with working with them on getting them to reorganize their school calendar, because even ourselves, we have to reorganize and re-gazette our school calendar. I'm sure even themselves, they will calculate that because they work on 3 terms, not on 4 terms, what is it that they need to put together. The bottom line is what DM is saying. They can't come forward and say, parents pay us, we're a private sector, we're opening. They can't do it. They will only reorganize when health says we're lifting up the ban on children going to schools. They can't do it outside that. We can't do it outside that. But I have no doubt that with them we'll be able to find a workable solution on how they reorganize and re-gazette their year calendar.
Yeah, thank you, Minister. Maybe what we must also say is to encourage all of us to go read the regulations that are governing the environment we are currently in. Because even on the issue of private schools, it's there. Right now, the Minister of Basic Education can determine what happens in both public and private schools. But the details are in the document, and I think it's important that we all make time to read and understand what is currently prevailing under the current situation. But just also to say that the basic education system is large. Even as we ask our questions about other possibilities that we are considering in terms of solutions, we need to remember that we have 13 million children who are in 25,000 schools, public schools. Right now, with private schools, it's way over 30,000 schools. And we have over 430,000 teachers in 9 provinces and 9.6 million children in the school nutrition program. So it's a massive undertaking that is out there for us. So when you have a solution, please take that into account, even as you suggest that to us. But just to add also that we will remain available online. As the Minister said, we are not moving, but we'll be available online. That's why we're also suggesting that our social media platforms are a good platform for you to get in touch with us in case you have any other questions that you might need to ask us. We'll be there available all the time. And yeah, we'll be able to respond to all other questions. One last round, if there are any questions that might have arisen after the ministers have spoken. I'm seeing one hand. Is that the last hand that we have? Any other questions so that we can close? All right. I'm going back to Nongod.
In line with just what you were saying now, in Nigeria, this idea of South African citizens or people in South Africa now that can play a role in making sure that our school communities are protected during this time. So the first thing is that I hope the Minister, together with the MECs, can think quite deliberately about watching the work of SABC and South African Defence Force inside our school communities as the lockdown sort of starts to midnight today. Children in particular, and young women who could be teachers, school personnel or not, will be in trouble during that period. And so that's why I was asking about the folk that are helping with safety protocols for the protection of children in particular. And I wanted to just clarify with the Minister that, so the shows that are going to be on TV and radio stations are all still revision of 2 and 1. Because what we've realized through talking to young children in different parts of South Africa is that work is continuing, and in different degrees depending on which school or the kind of school that you go to. So schools in quintile 4 and 5 are carrying on with school curricula as normal as they can. And so I'm just worried about perpetuating deeper inequalities as we go back into the school program post-corona. And my last question would be around, and the reason I was asking about scaling to staff is that, is there an opportunity for people like us who are inside civil society that want to assist the Department of Basic Education or provincial departments with making sure that there are physical hard copies of work, enrichment work, that you call it, enrichment material for learners? I worry about comrades in O to not being able to read anything for the next 2 months maybe, while others that have access to data will be able to find different platforms. And you had said the DB and PED websites are places where people can get information from people like HODs, but those aren't zero-rated, and that's why we were asking about data outside the virtual Vodacom spaces. We know about that.
That would have been the last question. In the absence of no other questions, we'll take it that when the minister finishes responding, we won't have any more hands. Minister, I'm handing over to you.
Yeah. Elijah, during lockdown, we're all community members, governed and guided by that National Command Center, which is led by health. So we will not operate as a school community and do things as a school community outside the broad framework. So in terms of school safety and all other things, they're going to fall under the protocols of just safety in communities, not in schools, because we won't be operating as a school committee. We're going to be operating as a community. Issues about the safety of children have been raised. Issues around the safety of women, to say, now that we find ourselves in the same space, sometimes the old tensions might just erupt. So what's going to happen to gender-based violence? And the answer is that, and we are relying, we had a meeting with the churches in the morning, we are relying on community structures now to carry us as a nation from here. Because I will not be able to guarantee that as a sector, we can still remain a community during the lockdown. Children are in communities now, so as part of the community. Teachers are all over. Some of them have left the provinces where they operate. So they are community members, they'll have to do their part. So during lockdown, we really would find it difficult to operate as a community. That's why we've been saying, and with all the pain that it brings, we've been saying we can't even feed outside the infrastructure. It's a sector. We can only work on social issues led by social development and community-based organizations and NGOs. For instance, where there are communities in difficulties, we're relying on community structures, on your NGO sector. So the Minister of Social Development is already coordinating with NGOs which work in the space of school feeding, the space of safety. But I really don't want to mislead the public and say, yes, indeed, we'll make sure that children are safe. Outside the schoolyard, we have no control at all. We can pretend that we don't have control out of the schoolyard. So we can do our part as citizens. So I would even encourage, for instance, volunteers to work through existing structures. You volunteer through NGOs in your community that work in the area of your interest. So in terms of how we curate the materials, that's why I say it's good that we work with provinces, with districts, with schools, so that it's not everybody doing what they think should be done. What we had discussed with MECs, we're calculating the time we had lost in term 1. That's why until this week, what we are going to focus on is going to be revision, because that's what we would have lost in term 1. Then go into Easters, which takes us to term 2. The preparations for materials, we're going to focus to say in term 2, what is the content, what are the things we're going to lose. But what you are correct about, it's about perpetuating inequalities, which unfortunately I think at this moment are out of our control. I know of schools, for instance, and these high-performing schools, even in townships, by grade 11, they've finished the curriculum for grade 12. Grade 12, by June, they're revising. So all these imbalances we know of, we are aware of them, but we're looking at what will be in our standard plans. That in terms of standard plans, term 1, this is what is supposed to have happened. Other schools have already dealt with your term 1 in 2019. It's not in our control. But we are saying in terms of our year plan, term 1 in terms of caps, this is what is supposed to be covered. Term 1 in terms of caps, term 2, this is what is to be covered. But you'll find that other people have already done it. You'll find hardworking kids have already done it. Kids who have access to ICTs, to computers, have already gone past that. So there are things which are not, we definitely are not in full control of and are aware of those difficulties in terms of inequalities. We're looking at protecting or doing that which we're in control of. Other things about distributing materials, I really want to repeat it. After midnight today, nothing moves in the name of DBE without our approval. We're saying the only thing we can really vouch for is programs which happen through the ICT platforms. Distribution of materials, when schools close on the 18th, I requested provinces to give children in rural areas worksheets, materials to read. Whether it happened fully, I am not aware, and we have not evaluated it. When they come back, we start where we stopped. We want to assume that nothing would have happened much outside your face-to-face. As DM has said, you can't replace the teacher. And we don't want to account for things we are not in control, in charge of, because it will also not be very easy. So any volunteering should happen through committee structures. The education sector or education community ceases to exist midnight today. We'll be talking with MECs. We're going to work through social development and health. We can only work and communicate through ICT platforms. Anything else, I want to say we are not going to be able to lead. I really hope it really doesn't sound insensitive, but it's the honest truth that we will deal with kids as community members, not as learners in schools, but as children in the community led by social development.
Yeah.
Okay, ngiyabonga. Ngifanta ngigcwalisele mangishort.
All right. Do you want it now?
Sikhulume ngeSuthu.
Do you want it now? Okay. All right. We'll deal with that. What do you want the minister to repeat in other language? What are the issues?
The issues that I asked about when schools are likely to open the semester.
Ufunele ngayazi.
And then just the preparations that you're looking at, the issues with the health department, and how will you ensure safety of the kids? That's what I want.
Okay.
Safety of the kids.
Okay. Kethi ngaSuthu or ngesiZulu?
Whichever you're comfortable.
Okay. Oh, okay, but it's bakhulule ke.
Okay, that's fine. Anyway, there were no other hands. So I think we've come to the end of the media briefing. If there are any other requests, people will deal with those afterwards on a one-on-one basis. So we want to thank you for the time. It's been a good hour from our point of view, and we appreciate all the questions. We are available to provide clarity on any of the matters that were raised here today. And thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Thank you, Minister and Deputy Minister.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ofuna bathathi imipopo yabo.
Lava angisho lava bakhuluma isiZulu.
Okay.
So lapha.
Okay.
Ngifuna ukuba ambushe ukukhuluma isiZulu kuwo wonke umuntu.
Hawaii
Lockdown.
And sizokusiza sizompaka yabona there are lots of girls here sizokusiza ukumpaka ke gender ha le khole akere le ka mo tshantse re mothike utla editor.
All right, so we're going to leave that there for the time being. That was the Minister of Basic Education, Angie Motshekga, addressing the media and talking about just what kind of an impact the coronavirus COVID-19 is going to be having, particularly on our learners. She says, amongst other things, that there's no telling when schools will be reopening following this lockdown. She says that will be led by the President. And she reminded the media that the sector poses a risk because of the nature of schools. 13 million learners, we believe, are going to be affected one way or another by this pandemic. So difficult times ahead. And you'll remember, of course, the Minister of Communications said that the SABC will make available channels to help teach, and virtual learning will be taking place. And we'll have more details on that very soon. All right, let's catch you up with the top stories this hour. Here.
We don't run in any because they are suffering.
We don't run in any state. So that when you begin to we're a caring government, but we're not in any state. Hey, she doesn't like it. We're a caring government, we're not in any state.